some of the science behind why putting ourselves, what I like to call state, I think that's a Tony Robbins thing, but like that state, that energy flow for you, and then being really accountable to your integrity and to yourself, because you're the one that's living your life and you should enjoy it, in my opinion. So I'm going to kind of do this a little bit differently. Karen, Sarah, James, Jim, you know, you guys can totally put questions in the chat, but I'm curious, speaker to speaker, are there any ahas or like welcomings that you want to like pour into each other?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. I found the conversation about boundaries really fascinating, and many of our guests on the podcast have talked about boundaries. That's been another common thread throughout. And also, we had talked about like every high school should have a class on boundaries. Every, you know, we should be incorporating boundaries into our teachings to our young people so that they're able to create them before it's like a necessary thing that they have to do, that it's just part of like their practice and their everyday lives, and it becomes really common. So I found that really fascinating, and I love hearing more about that for sure.
When I think about starting the morning out, I sometimes I'm in a running energy and in a like, get this energy out of me. And other times I'm in a place where that almost feels too hard on myself. And like you were mentioning, self-compassion, like I have to psych myself into not feeling unproductive by resting. I don't know if anybody else feels that way or has some tips too.
One of the things that I've learned is I have to listen to my body, like my life flow. I really do. When my energy is low, I have to listen. Yes, you can push through, and I know that society says push through, but I don't think that's always wise. That's why the person that was on before me, she was talking about, and I don't see her, I don't think, metabolism.
Yeah, I think Heather had a different something
right
too, but yeah.
And I kind of that was really interesting to me, is understanding how we can jumpstart our metabolism and stuff like that, you know, because that has a lot to do with your energy too. But I do think it's important that we take the rest. Rest is just as important. And compassion is just as important as being busy and moving forward. And I think sometimes we forget that. So I totally get what you were talking about, Mia. I think that is important in our life flow as well as being productive.
I love it. What really helps ground me is reiterating and remembering that my value, my contribution is not dependent on my production. And if it is, then I'm a product, and I don't want to be that because I'm a being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And rest is productive because you're setting yourself up for, you know, longevity in the workplace or within your family. And sometimes we do feel unproductive when we are taking those moments. But I love what you said about listening to your body. And, you know, I had personally a very extra busy month last month, and I noticed that I had to rest more than usual in order to, you know, function at the level that I know that I'm capable. And that's something that I wasn't used to. And you have to have that self-compassion piece and allow yourself to take the moments that you need in order to be successful.
And McKenna, when you realized you had to rest a little bit more than you were used to, did you still have a successful month?
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
Always, yeah.
Well, a perfect example. I'm an introvert. I really am.
What?
And it's not that I can't interact with people, but being around them totally drains me. especially when I'm around a lot of people. I mean, even Clubhouse, just listening to that many people talking at once is just too much. So I've been away with family last week, and just being constantly around family and constantly having that continual conversation and who's going to do this and that decision. When I got home for a whole week, I had no energy. And so you have to start listening at how your environment affects how you come back. And then you have to allow for that time of regrouping and replenishing and refreshing so that you get back. And you're right, that the fact that when you start listening to your own life flow in your body, when you are what they say productive, you're a lot more productive because things are happening faster, quicker, and they're sharper. So, just have my 2 cents.
I love that. I'm curious, Sean, tell me about your garden. And is there any place where maybe you were like, I think you mentioned like it was going to be too much. And then I imagine you started small. Open that up just to get some insight and pulling you into a different world of exposure.
Yeah. So before I do that, I just wanted to say I'm introverted as well. So I completely understand that. And like we said, we have to refill our cups before we can pour into others or other areas of our lives too. So that's so important. And for gardening, Mia, you said, I imagine that you'd started small, and that would be great, right? If I did, that would be a good idea. But I decided to just go for it. And I thought it was small, but it really, really wasn't. So it's smaller than what I originally had in mind, at least. So I started with 2 large raised beds and a bunch of pots. And so I thought that was small, right? But yeah, it's been a really interesting experience so far. And what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Just what takeaways? I know that it fills my cup. I think there's a piece in the natural connection or being connected to nature. It's still a different hobby though. Like it's so funny. Just kind of opening up in that sense.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's been really interesting. So I think even if I was a little overwhelmed with it, because I thought I had an idea of what I was doing, but it turns out I really don't. But that's okay too, because I'm learning as I go. And I keep telling everyone, this is my learning year, right? And I did a whole, I should have started last year, but it was a little too late in the season when I decided I wanted to. So I started doing research early and spent the winter continuing to research. And so I thought I would be prepared, but it turns out I thought I was planting, I was just making fun of this earlier, but I thought I planted 6 basil plants, but it turns out I have a lot more basil than I had planned on. So if anyone needs basil, I can send you some, let me know. And they're just, some of the plants get a lot larger than I realized they would. So I did not space things accordingly or really logistically plan how big they would be. But one of the cool things that we just got connected with is a local mutual aid group. And there's a big community garden. And so we're kind of sharing plants and tips. And so if someone needs basil, I can share basil. Or if they have a bunch of peppers, they're going to share some peppers with us. So it's kind of cool to kind of get used to that. And it connects us with community. As we all know, things are really uncertain always, but especially right now, things have been really rough in the world. And so it's been really nice to kind of connect in that way as well and just be prepared for if someone, for example, loses their job or is unhoused or something like that, we can kind of step in and have, we're already ready to go if they need something. So it's kind of cool. And that's really filling me up too. And I know that if something happens to us, then we'll be taken care of too. So hopefully that's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I did not know that the community, I mean, I do know the community building project is a part of this. Fun fact, I was 24 and we built 12 garden beds by hand, just wood 2x4s. We had plans and drills, but I guided, it was a community service project I did with City Year, which is an education reform, what's it called? It's called nonprofit. And so we guided, it was cool because they brought in like Sinuit, Microsoft, Google employees, and that was their like self-care day kind of thing. They got to like go into an elementary school and we like totally rebuilt these garden beds to teach the kids. And you're right that there's this sense of, right, like we only have a few survival things, right? Food, water, and just like interaction, in my opinion. And knowing that some of those things are in our control, especially when we're high performing controllers, allows you to like really savor into some of those things. So yeah, great work. And we've moved recently, Eric, my partner, and I, and so I think we're looking at community in that context too. So there's a question in the chat, and this will go to everyone, it looks like. Do you have any tricks to redirect your mind if it is strongly influencing your behaviors that are weak-willed in a day? So I think that there's maybe behavior patterns that keep us in that. Sometimes I don't like using small and big or contracted or expansive, like the duality isn't necessarily there, but that's what I'm thinking, is that like those behaviors are keeping us in that past version of ourselves. What are some tips energetically or in any of your guys' specialties to continue to step out of that on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm curious to know the answer too, because this could be really useful to know. But one thing that I've noticed so far that has actually helped me is just acknowledging it and just saying this is happening, and that has already helped me tremendously.
Yeah, so like recognizing, Yasmin, remember this? This is happening. We're doing it again. Yeah, so that's good. Noticing. So before I embark on a new goal or a new habit or something that I'd like to call in, I write it down. Literally, it helps me keep track of my mind and what's coming up. Like, what are the strong words behind what I want? And I go back and I reread it. And then I ask myself, and what I'm doing right now, is this in service of what I wrote down that I want to bring forth? So then it's like, oh, actually it's not. So let's course correct. And if it's a matter of I need rest, we'll take rest. It's because it's still in service of what you want. And then thirdly, I had to do this exercise. Like I really had to get clear on my values. Like, what is it that I am moving through to get to the place that, that I want, like whatever it is I want to create. And my first value is liberation / freedom. So that's my first one. There are 5 of them. My first one is that. So everything that I do has to be in service of liberation and freedom, because I know at the core of my being and my heart, that's what I want to continue to create with myself and with others around me and those who choose to work with me and journey with me. So therefore, it's going to help me be really, really clear when an opportunity comes along and it's in complete conflict with my liberation and freedom, i.e. my autonomy. Like it all ties in. Then that's really easy for me to say, okay, no, because the past self would have just taken anything because I had a scarcity mindset. Now I can look at it with abundance and be like, thank you very much. This does not align with my first value, which is liberation and freedom. And how does that tie into the autonomy of my time?
I really love that. We have our family values put on like a canvas because we wanted to remember that when we make choices for our family. And I think it's important to have values for different aspects of your life, values with your friendships, values with your family, values with your partner, and then of course work values. But I do think that helps us act as a guide, especially when you're trying to decide about something or make a challenging decision. Does it align? And that usually answers the question and kind of solves it for you.
For me, the awareness is a big thing, but I like to take it a little further. I do a lot of work with patterns, and that's start looking back in your life to the patterns and the why, where did those patterns come from and why? And a lot of times it takes just as, it took a while for that pattern to create itself. So it's going to take a while to create a new pattern. And it's just like, someone who say, wants to lose weight and they keep overeating, keep falling back to eating whatever, then it's like, why do I always do this? Oh, I only do it when I'm stressed. Okay, when did I start doing it? And then it's like, oh, that started, my mom would give me ice cream every time I got upset. You see, I got this thing with ice cream. But anyway, so start peeling back that onion on why you're doing this. And then that makes you aware. So then it's okay to out loud say, you start opening the refrigerator and you're going for, stop. That's my favorite, stop. And then you consciously make that choice to make that new pattern, that new decision. And that usually helps for me.
Oreo ice cream would be the most dangerous combination.
Yeah, the big vision, or I was gonna say the big vision for this retreat is you all get goodie bags. So I don't know how I'm gonna get freeze-dried Oreos in your house while you watch this next time, but I'll figure it out. Yeah. So we'll go Sean, and then Linda, you're welcome to speak on this context, McKenna, and then if anyone else has questions, so you can drop it in the chat or you can hop off the mic.
I just wanted to say real quick that stop thing is so powerful. I will say it out loud, even if it's embarrassing. Like if I have a negative thought, I can tell myself actively, just stop. And that whole action really helps in the moment.
Mm-hmm. We had an episode where we talked a lot about positive feedback loops and kind of rewiring your brain or resetting your patterns. And I think that's great what you were saying about recognizing why you're doing something in that pattern, because you can change it in a way that's rewarding to yourself and then potentially be more consistent over time and more rewarding in the long run.
These are all great. I'm loving this because as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, what is it that I do? And I think it's, like you talked about rewiring. I hear all these, terms of art, people use like rewiring your brain and stuff like this. And I myself am not completely familiar with the terms, but I think that's what I've done, right? Is rewiring the negative things from my past and turning those around. But also something I did recently that was a tremendous mindset change for me is my dad was not a very nice person from my perspective. I know people who love my dad, right? But from my perspective, and I didn't forgive him until, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago. But then I realized that the forgiveness wasn't enough, that it wasn't just about forgiving. It was about creating a new story in my head about who my dad was. And so for the last 100 days of last year, what I did is I would come up with a story of something about my dad and have that feelings of like, I didn't like it. I hated it or whatever. And then I would flip it around to creating a whole different story from his perspective. And it's interesting because when I put myself into I don't know what his shoes were because he passed away like 13 years ago, but I put myself into as if I was in his shoes and what the story was from his perspective. It's kind of interesting because by doing that, just shifting that around in my head, those same memories that I have that I used to just seethe with anger, I now see them completely differently. So it's changed the way I see people. And I mentioned earlier about my sister. So that's the same exact journey that I've started yesterday with my sister. So I think it's just a matter of tapping into the positivity that we have and who we are as human beings, and giving forgiveness and gratitude for what we do have in our lives, and then coming from that perspective. That's what I try to do.
What I've heard is kind of a combination of all this, is when I'm even helping other people, there's a version of yourselves, right? There's a version of yourselves when you're in a context, right? Even right now, or if this was in person, you would pull a different version of yourself to do that. And you're going to heal those components through the relationships around you, through the traumas in your past, right? Doing some of those in my opinion, like initial steps of work. And then there's this layer to take your mindfulness on your plate. And that's kind of what I heard in that question originally, was what's the behavior change? How do I actively choose to say, you know, I'm doing this differently without disregarding who I am? Because you're in this push and pull with yourself. And the practice, at least in my opinion, maybe, you know, other people can kind of tune into that, is you have to notice the version of you that's different, right? So for example, Linda, you'll have the attitudes I had with my father for the last 30 years. And then you also have, yesterday I chose to feel X about this now because it's not serving me. And when it's not in service of you, like Yasmin mentioned, right? There's a misalignment, and the misalignment is what we hold in our body tissues. It's what we hold in disease patterns. It's what we hold in, I'm going to emotionally eat. There's so much of that liberation that like doesn't even take a process to happen. And so, you know, like there's actually a hormonal response to acting as if, and it's like we know physiologically now it happens. I definitely am not trying to create a bunch of tribe members that are like mindless and just acting as if, don't get me wrong. You know, I want you responsible and personally attentive, but hopefully that supports that, you know, the evolution is an intimacy with that next version, plus a radical acceptance of where it was. And that's for everybody. Like everybody's where they were and everybody's what's next, and we get to do both. Okay. Any other questions? Anything we can support, you know, you with? The speakers are here for you. You know, this is a great place. If you love their links, I'll drop that again. If you have questions about, you know, the generator, you know, what a call would look like, anything like that. Vision Vault. Oops, I can't spell. So next question would be, how do we normalize shame emotions? I like this one. Everybody's face. Thanks, Linda.
I'm trying to, I'd like clarity on the question actually myself, like shame emotions. What is a shame emotion?
So I think it's going to be different for everyone. I imagine, Linda, you could probably speak from the place of how you overcame the judgment, right? You say that a lot in your book, that there's this dialogue of judgment that you kind of were fearful of. Maybe that's, I think.
So the shame that judgment caused me, maybe.
Yeah.
Or the shame of being myself, the shame of standing up for myself, and you know, feeling shamed that if I do stand up for myself, that somebody's going to judge me for it. Maybe like that. Yeah. I used to be my own worst enemy for decades. You know, it's a saying that people throw around all the time. I hear people say it all the time. And I was one of those who said it all the time. And how did I get to that place? Like, I'm now my best cheerleader. And what's been great about becoming my best cheerleader is that I no longer need to look outside of me for approval, or I no longer need to look outside of me to get that, you got this, girl, you go, girl, you know, because I do that myself all the time. Now, Michelle does it for me all the time too. Michelle sends me all kinds of messages like on a daily basis. So I get it from other people as well. But the key here is that I don't need it. I used to need that outside dialogue from other people to even remotely think that I was worthy of anything, because even though they would say nice things about me, I didn't believe them. It was because my own self-judgment against myself. I used to blame others, but it was really only it was myself. I was beating myself up. And so I couldn't hear what other people were saying, the good things about me. So making that shift for me, it really went to a perspective. There was an exercise that my life coach did that I'll share with you. Really, it'll be a fast exercise. my life coach did that really helped me to shift into that different mindset. But again, it was my choice to make the shift. If I didn't choose, it wouldn't have happened. So what she did is we had like 12 of us in a room, and she would have each one of us sit on a chair, and everybody would say what they saw in us. So the question was, what do you see in this person? Even people that didn't know me, had never met me until that day there, said all kinds of things about me that were just amazing. I see a leader. I see a strong woman. I see confidence. I see a pioneer. They were saying all these words that I was like, what? You see me as, I didn't see any of those things in myself. And so what I did is I took all those things that these people said about me, and I came up with this phrase that is to see yourself through the eyes of others, for others see the real you, not the negative people, only the positive people. So see yourself through the eyes of others, because others see that real you. And I took those words and I said, if Jane sees this about me, it must be real. It's about time that I believe this too. It didn't happen overnight. It probably took me about a year and a half to really get to that place where I truly believe these things about myself. And now I have that confidence about myself, I'm walking on this planet as the person other people see me as, and I now believe it. So that really helped me to get to that place so that these shame emotions, they don't come up anymore. That's the beauty of what it did for me, is those shame emotions don't come up anymore. So that's why I think when I heard that, I was like, what the heck? I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean? And really, it's just getting to that place of that confidence of believing in yourself, of who you are, what your purpose is, what your why is. Why are you here on this planet? And for you to serve in service of the planet, of why your purpose here. So that's how I could talk about this all day long, but I won't. But that's my take on it.
Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we have a couple minutes to flex with this panel, because we'll, after this, shift into showcasing the series that we did the previous round, because there's just some really powerful speakers there, and then they're going to do a roundtable at 12:30. So it's like I'm going to hop into a video for you guys and go grab a snack myself. I'll be around though. And so anybody else can speak about shame. I feel like I felt you, Yasmin, Michelle. Let's finish up on this question, and then you're always welcome to continue the conversation with any of these people powerfully one-on-one inside their communities with me. I want to hold that space that this is real.
Yeah, Karen, thank you so much for the question. Linda, I'm going to build on what you said, because I actually started doing that. I didn't know that was an exercise. I just started noticing, okay, what's coming through other people that is resonant, and I'm hearing from other people. So if I'm hearing it from other people consistently, it's coming through them and I'm supposed to hear it. And then I just started writing down what I kept hearing. And from folks who I had met, from folks who'd been around me, here are some of the things that I wrote down that I couldn't even believe myself, but that's why I keep track of my mind and I write things down that people have said. Your words move people. Your voice moves people. You are creative. You are a light. You give amazing hugs. You're the peacemaker. You're a badass. You make it happy if you're unhappy in a situation. You accomplish so much. I don't know how you do it. You're a way maker. All these phrases I just kept hearing from people throughout the last 6 weeks. This is an exercise I did, no matter how weird I felt about hearing, because I have trouble taking compliments. I just wrote them down. And these are phrases that I keep consistently hearing from folks. And I was like, okay, so if this is what I'm hearing, what am I telling myself? And then on the other side of the paper, I wrote down what I was saying to myself, and they didn't match up. So I was like, there you go, lady. We got to integrate, right? There's a disconnect here. And so our work is to bridge, right? To bridge how we have been talking to ourselves and what we consistently hear through other people who are sharing uplifting, beautiful words that are truthful, that help us see, we got that in us too. So go easy with you. It's a journey and we're all going through it. Thank you for your question.
It's awesome. Awesome. Linda knows that I'm a perpetual, or have been in the past, a perpetual people pleaser. And based on expectations that I feel that I should feel. And because of that, the biggest thing for me was surrender. is surrendering this responsibility of something that was not mine to be responsible for. And so in the same line that you said is Linda and Yasmin, is that we have to understand who we are. And unfortunately, I'm going back to the B word and our boundaries and understand. But that's how we know who we are. And I really had to surrender. I used to think that I was responsible for the actions of my daughter. I was responsible for whether someone's happy. I was responsible for how someone felt. And I had to surrender that responsibility that was not mine. And that was a big one for me, is learning to surrender that responsibility that's not yours to be burdened with.
Thank you all so much for your answers and the authenticity in this room. It means a lot. And I know that whether you're watching live with us today or, in the replays or even further along, inside the Well-Fed Warrior portal as part of your membership, that this fuels you to remember to create versions of yourself, and that even from one day to the next, because of a change pattern, you can redefine those boundaries. You can redefine the values and priorities that make so much of life enjoyable, and want to walk the path towards love and away from fear. And every day, any creative process you have is boundless, as Dr. Yasmin has said. And so thank you so much for being on this panel.